You're looking good. You who are 3 steps above average. I'm Kendall Bryan Hunter. This is the Eyes of Faith podcast. I'm author of this book, Consider My Servant Job. It's a commentary about the book of Job in the Old Testament. Everyone's going through trying times right now. The uncertainty of war. My 401k is down $10,000. I'm 55. That really hurts because I'm getting close to retirement. My crypto wallet's down 36%. So this is why you invest in bonds and certificates of deposit, because this serves as a cushion. So if there's anything you hear me say, anything that you change right now is if you have some money, make sure you're putting it into stable bonds or certificates of deposit. Of course, check with your financial institution. On top of that, I hope you're turning to God. That's what my book's about. Turning to God in the face of trials. On May 17th, President Trump's going to hold a ceremony and rededicate the country. Of course, you always have questions of legality. Some of these are legitimate. Is he establishing religion? Is we converting to the Church of Donald Trump? He does sell Bibles, the Lee Greenwood Bibles. What's the legality of this? Well, my degree is in history. I have a minor in political science. And generally, the answer to this stuff is no, unless you have certain qualifications. That's part of a broader thing. The situation where you have a Roman Catholic priest, Orthodox priest, Franklin Graham there, the local tribal shaman, and you have a lesbian rabbi in there, and that's okay. So it's diffuse, where it's clear that's not one denomination. Also, the government grandfathers things in, like having the prayer in Congress. So you can't have a prayer in high school, but you can have a prayer in Congress. That's a clear double standard. This is an issue to me. I've been reading the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints is having this section on religious freedom. So I went and cut and pasted a lot of these talks. It's about 400 pages, 12-point Roman font, standard font. I'm about 74% of the way through. Talks by President Oaks, President Christopherson, and Elder Quentin L. Cook, plus Elder Holland thrown in there. And it's interesting reading. It's eye-opening. I'm not ready to talk about it yet. I'm not finished with it, but there is some sanity in the cyclone, the cyclone events we're experiencing, the wars and perplexities of nations. There's always Christ we can turn to. I hope you're turning to him. So today's lead story is no thought on my part, but I saw this in Jewish World Review last week, and it's called Trump's Way of War by Victor Davis Hanson. And he has these points about it, where you sit there and you look at Trump. People on the left, they always bless their souls. They come up with emotional reasons to do things. The emotional hysterics, screaming. But this has a thoughtful, all limbic system response as opposed to, and this is a prefrontal cortex response to it. So point one is geostrategy. Always behind these seemingly unconnected events and other non-kinetic moves, like warning Panama about Chinese intrusions, strategic concerns loom. The common denominator is usually isolating China from strategic spaces, allies, and oil, and Russia in a lesser sense. Loud and terrorist, but ultimately impotent proxies of strategic enemies, Cuba, Iran, Venezuela, are preferable targets. They're not easily identified enemies. They're not just easily identified enemies, given their past anti-American violence. They're also targeted because their demise offers a global display of the weakness of their distant patrons and underwriters. Chew on that for that. That's a great thing. It's not 100% clear, but it is something to think about. Let me pause here for a second. Thank you for that. It's the nose. I want to keep this. Remember Daniel Jackson from Stargate? So in the movie, Daniel Jackson had hay fever, but in the TV series, he suddenly lost it. I guess going into the regeneration sarcophagi, I'm not like that. I have to blow my nose. It's unprofessional, but yeah, it's just the weather. It's affecting me. So you saw a couple of when I had to split the podcast in half. So yeah, it's kind of getting ahead of me. So I apologize for being really unprofessional, but I hope that conveys authenticity. I don't do theme songs. I don't do merchandise. I don't have sponsors. It's just you, me, and the truth. I'm not accountable to anyone. I don't want anything to get in the way of me speaking my heart to you. And I hope we have a good relationship with that, because I just want to be authentic with you. We're in a situation where the only thing that works is authenticity. So Victor Davis Hanson, point 2, ways of reckoning. Trump always frames his interventionalism as reactive and long overdue. So that's the framing. Pay attention to the framing persuasion game. It's sort of, quote, reckoning war for previously overlooked crimes that his predecessors had ignored, but are often seared in the American mind. Preemptive or preventative wars these strikes may be, but Trump himself avoids the baggage of those adjectives of aggression conveying the collective American memory. So you've seen this on Facebook, how George W. Bush, Obama, so they all made statements about Iran. And then when Trump did, he said, "I'm the first president ever to do it." That's your study of Scott Adams' analysis of Donald Trump's persuasion. Yeah, that's what he's doing. He said, "Look, yeah, we've been doing this for 2 decades now, and actually longer. Back from 1979. Okay, I'm the first person taking action," and that resonates with people unless you're extremely polarized. Remember with that Cambridge study. There's a study in Cambridge where we talked about polarization. It's just that the left is moving. Now, we all saw it, but this actually gives quantifiable and scientific data to support that. 3, war among negotiations. Trump's way of war making is usually an extension of ongoing negotiations. Remember, he's a businessman, and win-win or no deal. Here's all the cards. Here's what I'm doing. Okay, you make a deal with me or I'll blow you up. And remember, making a deal with him is the peaceful way. He said, okay, carrot and stick, the peaceful option. Trump's way of war making is usually an extension of ongoing negotiations. For example, over Iran's nuclear weapons or Maduro's subsidies to terrorist and drug trafficking. So during discussion, he offers various exit ramps to his adversaries and publicly laments the possibility of violence. Meanwhile, American naval and expeditionary assets show up and amass to ramp up the pressure. Trump does not wait for negotiations to fail, but usually offers a deadline to his adversaries, and he simply informs his adversaries of the point at which the enemy has no intention of seeking a peaceful settlement. A strike follows. And he says, like I said, okay, we've been working with you for a few months. You're not moving. This isn't good faith, so we got to blow you up. I'll talk about that a little bit later. If you're a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, do you disavow your actions during the war in heaven? Point 4, the culpable apparatus. Trump prefers top-down war. That is, he starts his attacks by targeting the enemy apparatus, not the lesser henchmen. So you go for the head of the snake, not the wiggly body. When you want to have that boa constrictors around your neck, you go for the head, not for the body. That is, he starts his attacks by targeting the enemy. The aim is both to disrupt its command and control and to separate an enemy leader from a population deemed not necessarily culpable. His enemy counterparts, al-Baghdadi, Khamenei, Maduro, Soleimani, the Wagner Group, are widely recognized as odious, which strengthens his prophylactic or reactive action. For all the boilerplate, even Trump's enemies do not gain empathy, since their anti-war activism becomes inseparable from the de facto defense of a rogues gallery of deposed and hated killers and thugs. The post you see there is all these women. First of all, the people trading, okay, Ukrainian flag, now Palestinian flag, now an Iranian flag. Children in the marketplace. I played the pipe, you haven't danced. I've mourned and ye have not wept. And then the woman defending Iran, they'll say, well, under Trump, we've lost all these rights. Well, can you enumerate them? Which rights have you lost? You have to change your name on a driver's license. First world problems. 5, no to nation building. This is a departure from George W. Bush. There's no big nation building. Trump sees the U.S. as responsible only for lighting the fuse of revolution and giving the oppressed the chance for something better if they do miss or miss their chance if they do not miss their chance at regime change and working with the Americans. No boots on the ground. There are few ground troops involved. No chance to sort of Abu Ghraib misadventure or accumulating skedaddles from Kabul or maimed Americans from shape-charged IED. It's much harder for targets to kill Americans in the air and on the seas. And because of their zero investment in the occupying country and hands-on rebuilding of its institutions, casualties are kept to a minimum. Trump equates the danger of a larger ground force in the Middle East with imbecility. IEDs, S-vests, suicide vests, rocket salvos are less effective. And given America's fighting its sort of war with overwhelming firepower, technical advantage, and mobility in the air and the oceans. Now pay attention to that. Trump prefers overkill to shock and awe or using minimalist forces. Visuals are important. So you remember that as President Bush, or there's a consensus among the elites that if you break it, you bought it. So if you blow up Iran, you're responsible for building it. Trump says, no, I'm not responsible. I'm taking this responsibility of the people. That's very different. Like I said, it's a very different strategy. So people are stuck in on the rat wheel of repeating forever war, quagmire, forever war. And then President Trump says, no, okay, this is your problem. Okay, I blew you up and you need to take matters in your own hands. In other words, he's delegating responsibility. Can you say the word delegation? 7, exit strategy. There's an exit strategy of sorts. This is, again, Victor Davis Hanson, partly rhetorical and partly real, but usually arbitrarily declared by Trump himself. So he's controlling reality. Okay, he has a football, so here's the rules. And is this Darth Vader, or is he acting in his self-interest? He alone starts the shooting and stops it according to his own definition of when the war begins and ends. The enemy has a vote, of course, but Trump frames the conflict in the ways that lessen his say. Because a transactional rather than ideological Trump holds few grudges. Pay attention, Trump does not hold grudges. Mike Pence and President Trump can repair things really quickly. All Mike Pence just has to say is, President Trump and I don't agree on this. There's thousands of other areas where we agree on and we can work together. And that's how you work with Trump. You just offer him a deal. Like I said, he's a businessman. Say, okay, we can't work here. Does this deal work for you? And Pelosi could have done it, and Biden could have done it. Everyone could have done it if you just approach him and say, okay, I want to cut a deal with you. Okay, well, let's do some bargain hunting. Ladies, shop for that bargain with Donald Trump. Think about that. Just change that. Just form what you're saying as a bargain with Trump, and he'll work with you. Make Iran great again. He praises Venezuelan people. If the enemy refuses to give up, Trump assumes it eventually will. He has endless patience, both to pound it by air and sea, and then at any moment praise the defeated and declare the hostilities over. Now he does have a time limit, and this is the question: what's going to happen when he gets out of power? Are we going to go back to drag queen story time and pulling Parlor offline? Who's the next Charlie Kirk? And give yourselves a moment to pause on that. Critics counter that without regime change, that so often requires ground troops rotating the faces of the current Venezuelan or Iranian government, will not result in radical change in the target nation's behavior. Well, like I said, if we can't build up a country, it really is their problem. They need to work it out. We can't solve the problems for them. It's a bit like you're going to hate this. It's like getting welfare help from the bishops. The bishop says, okay, we can keep you. Here's your time limit. But at some point, we have to shut off the welfare, and you have to figure this out on your own. No mommy state. No, we're not the fairy godmother. No to internationalism. Trump cares nothing for the UN's condemnations, given its own moral bankruptcy and lack of credibility. Was Ezra Taft Benson right about the United Nations? Now, remember as a little kid, growing up, think, wow, this is a good idea. There were 13 colonies that got together, formed a country, and that worked. So let's get 13 countries together, and it doesn't work because the histories are too disparate. We're different countries, but we have different ideologies. Especially if you serve your mission outside the United States, you understand this whole globalism international thing is we're not similar countries, we're very different. For action outside of Europe, he does not really consult NATO and much less the European Union. He assumes all three will follow predictably a script. Initially critical, then tentatively as the tide of battle turns, and finally either praising Trump's success, or are you going to get on it, get in on it itself? That's the leadership magnet that Trump has. He has the energy, and you're seeing this right now. Is he launched it? So again, like, yeah, we're America. You're already dependent upon us, and other countries are starting to follow in because he's winning. Notice he worry much about veiled threats from Russia or China. Is careful to consult a key few in Congress, but cares less even that the American left oppose everything he does. And that's the thing is, the Arab Street, well, they already hate us, and stop pretending like they don't. He expects their Pavlovian resistance and considers their shrill outbursts in street theater, public relations as pulses, and right stuff of future campaign ads. Exactly. One of Glenn Beck's books, I think it was called Arguing with the Idiots, on the back, he just had critical reviews of people who are critical of him. Deterrent displays. Trump uses his strikes as global reminders of American prowess. He showcases the USS Gerald R. Ford mammoth carrier, the largest warship in history of the conflict. That's the next generation, is the Nimitz-class carriers, which was the mainstay of our fleet during the 80s and 90s. That's being retired now, so we have the next generation. Media maps of American naval assets cover 4 disparate areas surrounding the Iranian theater. New weaponry is showcased, or its mysterious sonic boom weapon at Maduro's presidential palace. Kamikaze drones. That's interesting, is how the drones, because a $300 drone can take out some ships, but EMP, would that solve the problem? I don't know. It's a question, because an EMP would take out hospitals. 10th, American self-interest. Trump will not act unless the public can be appraised of American self-interest. And that's important to communicate. The Vietnam issue, what's America's self-interest? And then cost-benefit calculation. There's a good chance of success. He has no interest in liberating and rebooting another Iraq or Afghanistan, since their oppressed populations may hate the infidel Americans as much as they do their own oppressors. So that's the 10 points. How's your mind? Are you completely reframed? Have you had an aha experience? Once again, I'm talking to your limbic system, not the. I'm talking to your prefrontal cortex, not your limbic system, not the throwing the fit, just screaming Trump's a fascist. And we talked about that. Anti-Trump OCD, people who sit there and repost. Wait a minute, Trump's not going away. I need to repost more. He's still not going away. I'm not reposting enough. Yeah, it's OCD. He has this quote that I want to pay attention to. Teddy Roosevelt's famous for saying, "Speak softly and carry a big stick." This is why I'm not a public speaker. My mouth doesn't quite work right sometimes. Speak softly and carry a big stick versus speak loudly, carry a bigger stick and use it. Yes, I was quoting Bugs Bunny from a Warner Brothers cartoon there, but I own stock in Warner Brothers. What Trump says and what says Victor Davis Hanson, what Trump says and does are sometimes divergent. Funding Ukraine weakens Russia, which is in the U.S. interest, so Trump finds a way to keep the arms coming mostly without commentary. Letting Israel take care of the business and jumping into the war to humiliate Iran last summer unleashes forces that destroyed the Assad regime in Syria and finally got Russia out of the Middle East. Now, it's really interesting. I think it was called Al-Quds. There's a anti-Israeli holiday called Al-Quds. That's the Arabic name for Jerusalem. And because they want to get control of it. Now, it's the third most sacred site in Islam, and that's why Iran's launching missiles at American base and these other countries. But what that does is that gives these other countries to say, hey, look, we're fellow Arabs and you're bombing our countries. We're going to turn on you. Fellow Muslims, I should say. Iranians are Persians, not Arabic. But fellow Muslims, and you're blowing us up. Now remember Captain Moroni. This is from the Book of Mormon. What he says and what he does. Chapter 54. But as the Lord liveth, our army shall come upon you, except you withdraw, and you shall soon be visited with death. For we will retain our cities, our lands, and we will maintain our religion and the cause of our God. And behold, if ye do not this, I'll come against you with my armies. Yea, I will arm my women and my children, and I'll come against you, and I will follow you even into your own land, which is the land of our first inheritance. Yea, it shall be blood for blood, life for life, and I'll give you battle even until you are destroyed from off the face of my earth. Behold, I am in my anger. That's not Donald Trump, that's Captain Moroni. But what did Captain Moroni do? You see the point? You feeling it right now? What he says and what he does. And that's a bit of the problem, is that some of these Arab countries, just to save face, would be macho, if there's such thing as a machismo in that part of the country. They'll brag about things, boast and brag. It's like, okay, are you bragging or are you telling the truth? And in the face of uncertainty, what's the appropriate action? So someone says, I have a gun, and if you don't hold quiet, I'll pull it out and shoot you. So what exactly do you do? First of all, you denial about human nature. And I really think about this. When someone says they're going to use a weapon, but it later turns out they didn't have one, they're just bragging or bluffing. Was that an appropriate action, given the common sense version of how do you act with uncertainty? Well, there you go. That's Victor Davis Hanson. That was. I hope that was worth your time, because you sit there and just see all these weird posts. Like I said, you're friends with Trump OCD, just reposting stuff. And wait, the problem's still here. I need to post some more. So let's go to the news blips. A judge smacks down Tyler Robinson's request to seal key Charlie Kirk murder evidence. This is from the Gateway Pundit. On my way to work, I passed by the courthouse. I could tell there was something up. There was a truck out there with the lights going on. They were filming stuff there, so I knew something was up. But yeah, this needs to be public. And you're kind of curious about the very red state, Utah, if you can actually get a fair trial. But on the other hand, is there any question about what happened? Think about some other cases like that. Think about Parler. January 6th was run exclusively by Parler, so you punish everyone who used Parler, myself included, because a few bad actors. Old Dominion shooting, 2 men charged with using a weapon. That's a separate one. The Old Dominion shooting, I didn't have time to put it in there. You can't keep ahead of the news now. 2 men are charged with using a weapon of mass destruction after IEDs tossed near New York mayor's home. You saw that, and you saw the clip where that encapsulates the difference between the left and the right. The guy says, "Yeah, you're all welcome here," and the guy just throws a bomb right over his head as he's speaking that. And there's a blank out. They just can't process that. It's like, yeah, you said you're welcome here, just as they're blowing it up. Like, that goes back to brain structure. Prefrontal cortex, where you process logic, or your limbic system, where you process emotion. And that's the reason why we can't talk with each other, is people on the left rely upon the limbic system. People on the right use the prefrontal cortex. It's a brain structure question. This is an old news story, but I hope this gets you up out of your chair cheering. Palantir CEO Alex Karp. Our country has empathy for everybody but working class, particularly white males. Our country has selective empathy for everybody but working class, particularly the white males. And that's interesting, because the Democrats have lost their base. It was the Hollywood elite. The party of the rich is the Hollywood elite of the Democrats. And it's a shift, and they let it happen. So all these people, so like I say, precisa aprender a hablar castellano. You need to learn to speak Spanish if you want to be a good Republican. Speak Spanish. And that's the direction. When you look at mainstream newspapers on the constitutionality of blowing up boats, bringing fentanyl here, I guarantee you, if that fentanyl was killing people at schools we went to, potentially our kids, your kids are going to it would be constitutional to blow up those boats. Let me read that again. When you look at mainstream newspapers on the constitutionality of blowing up boats bringing fentanyl here, I guarantee you that if fentanyl was killing people at schools we went to, potentially your kids are going to, it would be constitutional to blow up the boats. That's a very unusual way of kind of speaking, is when you talk, there's a different cadence with the way you talk versus the way you say something that's thought out. Like when you hear conference talks, they're very thought out and they're reading a script, but that's how you talk off the top of your head. So that's what the Palantir says. Yeah, if you could track the fentanyl going to our schools, yeah, you'd have no problem blowing it up. It was your children or was your neighbor, and that's the only thing, is that you just can't see it. Once again, you can't think abstractly. Prefrontal cortex versus limbic system. So he's presenting a limbic system argument, appealing to your emotions. So that was head of Palantir. He's speaking up for the new victim class, the white male. So PLTR, that's the stock for Palantir. Vote with your money. Buy stock in Palantir if you agree with that. Index funds also count, technology ones. So if you can't afford that, sometimes you might be able to afford an index fund where you indirectly own stock in Palantir. Like, I don't own direct shares, but I do own it through index and mutual funds. But I also talked about the empathy. We're this diffuse, empathetic to everyone except white men. But then that gets further sinister when it becomes suicidal empathy. Remember that term, suicidal empathy, where it's self-destructive. You love these points where you're allowing them to destroy our economy, coming in here, committing welfare fraud, and just turning a blind eye to it. Suicidal empathy. These ladies who supporting these terrorists, the radicalized single white female, supporting anti-female terrorist states like Iran. So here's another news blip, a little bit more positive. Church in America, 250. This week, the First Presidency issued this nice spiffy letter about America's 250th anniversary, semi-quincentennial. Bicentennial, easy to say. Semi-quincentennial, a little bit more awkward, so it's a good call on 250. It makes an easier hashtag if you're still into those. So we're going to have a lesson on May 1st where we talk about the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution. Once again, that 400-page document where I'm reading talks by general authorities about religious freedom. We're losing our ability to testify. We're losing our ability to organize stuff. I forgot this back 10 years ago. The mayor of Houston, a lesbian woman, was subpoenaing speeches or sermons from pastors in the area which were critical of her. Okay, yeah, that's clear violation. That's clear human rights violation. So there's going to have that special lesson on May 31st, coincidentally the same month when Donald Trump's going to rededicate the country. Then on July 5th, which is the first Sunday after the 4th of July. 4th of July is on Saturday. Very convenient. Most people are off work that day. And it's a little bit of a ripoff. You have a holiday on Saturday. It doesn't quite count, but July 5th, we're going to have a special fast day. Gratitude for religious liberty, and I pray that it's strengthened throughout the world. Because, we're getting our speeches getting limited, which is a human rights violation. It'll have, the main speakers, President Oaks, President D. Todd Christopherson, and Quentin L. Cook have been the main speakers on religious freedom. So there you go. Now, I read this morning. This is from the Deseret Snooze. Opinion. The 2026 legislature is notable for what it didn't do. Well, I think it was Calvin Coolidge who said that it's important not only to pass good legislation, but to stop bad legislation. I can't remember. If he didn't say it, it's good advice on its own. Are you stopping the bad things from passing? So what it said, part of this editorial from the Deseret Snooze, lawmakers also did not scuttle the Utah Compact, which has been heralded as a model for how states should handle undocumented immigrants. Now that's interesting because immigrations, that's a federal question. Right there in the Article 1, Section 8 about uniform naturalization, uniform rule of nationalization. Bills to tax money transfers by immigrants in the country legally. So you have people in the country here illegally, and they're getting remittances. I see this at Smith's all the time. They'll line up there at the desk and use the Western Union to transfer stuff to home countries. I'm kind of curious why the Somalis didn't do this, because apparently they're hitting the ATMs, taking out suitcases full of money and shipping it back to Somalia. But I guess it's the untraceable, because paper's untraceable. But bills attack money transfers by immigrants in this country illegally to require immigrants in this country illegally. Notice the word phrasing of that. Instead of saying illegal immigrants, saying, they're immigrants, but they're illegally. To require businesses to verify legal status. Wait a minute. So we can't verify legal status? That happened at work one day. My boss told me about this. They hired a new guy, but when they're checking his social security number, it didn't match up, and we never heard from him again. And to end subsidies for such immigrants all failed. So businesses are not supposed to verify legal status, and businesses ending subsidies for such immigrants. So it'd be subsidies for illegal immigrants. Isn't that just the Utah version of the Somali fraud game going on? Nick Shirley, you need to come back here to Utah. Of course, California's a bigger target. I am a refugee from California, but think about that. Not verifying legal status for employment and subsidies. They said this is a good idea. All failed, and the next sentence is, this is a good thing. Deseret News. Applauding Somali fraud. Utah fraud. You remember what President Trump said? The first duty of the American government is to protect American citizens, not illegal aliens. He's a very quotable president. He's a very vulgar and insulting person. You go to Truth Social, and it's the alpha male of the planet just really insulting people. Some it's sort of a perverse, there's black humor with it, dark humor with it. But, his quote, I don't know what he said there at the end. I don't think he knows what he said there at the end. That's one for the books, with Nancy Pelosi ripping up her State of the Union speech. But the first duty of the American government is to protect American citizens, not illegal aliens. And we're not agreed on that. That's a sanity issue. That's a catastrophic failure if the Democrats, when they go to power, don't think it's their job to protect American citizens rather than just empowering illegal aliens. What's the cost of not verifying employment, and what's the cost of subsidizing? I was a financial clerk, and so you always have the concerns about welfare fraud and bishops creating magnet wards. I had to deal with that. Shortly after I got called, we switched bishops. No, actually, we switched bishops, and then I was called, and so one of the things the new bishop had to do was he had to invite the people who were outside of ward boundaries to leave. And I noticed one thing about them is that they were welfare dependent. That's why you have people who live outside ward boundaries that are welfare dependent, and that's what they're doing is they found I'll say it, they found a sucker bishop who's willing to bend rules so they could keep the welfare coming. And that's why it's against church policy, because that's an appropriate term, because they're violating directions from the church, and it makes me sick to say that. But we need to say that. So, not surprising news. A recent Pew Research Center survey from March 2026 addressed whether belief in God is necessary to be moral. That's really interesting. So this is Pew Research, Pew as in the benches you sit on. It polled adults in 25 countries, finding that 68% of U.S. adults say belief in God is not necessary for morality and good values, up from earlier years when they were more divided. In contrast, nearly all in Indonesia, which is Muslim, Kenya, India, and South Africa, say is required. That's in the 90s and 80s. Well, is belief in God necessary for morals. Well, Aristotle, who was a pagan, or sort of an atheist pagan, or that's not a correct term. It's a little bit hard. He had an idea of God, but it was more of a philosophical, detached God. It's a little bit hard to peg down. People, we can debate this, and you can correct me, and I'll be open to the correction. But its ethical system is based on character. And you have Immanuel Kant, who was a believer, but he came up with his categorical imperative. He also believed in the starry heavens above and the moral law within. So he believed that human nature did have this moral law. So it works if you believe that. And you have Jeremy Bentham and John Stuart Mill with utilitarianism, which is the dominant ethical theory, which is just a sort of a calculated hedonism. So yeah, there are systems that are ethical systems or moral systems that are atheistic, but this is what Friedrich Nietzsche said in his book Twilight of the Idols. Penguin Publishers, you can get a copy of Twilight of the Idols with his other really famous book, The Antichrist. And this is a section called Skirmishes with an Untimely Man. When we renounce the Christian faith, we abandon all right to Christian morality. Christianity is a system, a complete outlook upon the world, conceived as a whole. If its leading concept, the belief in God, is wrenched from it, the whole is destroyed. Nothing vital remains in our grasp. Christianity presupposes that man does not and cannot know what is good or bad for him. The Christian believes in God, who alone can know these things. Now, let me qualify that. That comes from a Protestant out. Nietzsche was German, so you have Protestant with depravity. Martin Luther did not believe in free will, whereas we believe we have the light of Christ. So you need the light of Christ, and then you have the higher law. So it's a little bit different with what we believe. If the English really believe that they know intuitively of their own accord what is good and evil, if therefore they assert that they no longer need Christianity as a guarantee of morality, this in itself is simply the outcome of the dominion of Christian valuations and a proof of the strength and profundity of this dominion. It only shows that the origin of English morality has been forgotten, and that its exceeding relative right to exist it is no longer felt, and that its exceedingly relative right to exist is no longer felt. For Englishmen, morality is not yet a problem. And you see that. I saw some news that the cathedral in Cologne, France, is they're starting to charge admission. Oh, that's interesting. Like I said, I served my mission in Portugal. So, you can go to a cathedral and it's a church. So you just walk in there and it's a church and see the sights. You have to be careful walking on the floor because people would be buried on the floor, except I think there's one church in Sweden. And there's just so many people buried in there. I just have to step on these graves. So, but yeah, they're charging admission to churches now. Churches are tourist sites. People want an effect without a cause. Think about that. You take away belief in God, but you want divine morality. Dallin H. Oaks said this August 5th, 1990, Sin and Suffering, BYU speech. Such persons want the present convenience or enjoyment of sin and the future effects of righteousness in that order. They want to experience the sin, but to avoid its effects. Now, you can flip that around, and it also works. They want the effects of righteousness without the obedience. And then, which is what Nietzsche is saying, that they want Christian morality without Christianity, and it doesn't work. And it's the same principle. You want an effect without a cause. What happens, people from other countries move into Utah for the values, but they end up corrupting the state of Utah. And you can call me xenophobic, label me if you need to. Once again, that's a limbic system tactic. But is it going on? So people want the effects of righteousness without obedience, and they think they can get away with this by asserting God's grace. Limbic system, the alogical appetites, discordant demands on reality. How's reality functioning? So America 250, I think I covered that. Another section, the America 250, the fasting and prayer. Of course, you always need it. The devil teaches people not to pray. We need spiritual renewal. So my 401k is lost a lot of money. I'm getting close to retirement, and will I have enough time to build it up? Okay, 39 minutes. Here's a culture comment. Declaration on the Elimination of All Forms of Intolerance and Discrimination Based on Religion or Belief. Article 5.2. The Declaration on the Elimination of All Forms of Intolerance and of Discrimination Based on Religion or Belief. And this comes from this research I've been doing with talks from general authorities on religious freedom. Article 5.2 says this: every child shall enjoy the right to have access to education in the matter of religion or belief, in accordance with the wishes of his parents, or as the case may be, legal guardians. So family proclamation, the family has the ultimate say-so. And the children shall not be compelled to receive teaching on religion or belief against the wishes of his parents or legal guardians, the best interest of the child being the guiding principle. So what this document says is that children cannot be compelled against that. And they have that little caveat, the best interest of the child. But, children cannot be compelled to receive teaching against the wishes of his parents. Now, think about that in terms of schools or teachers' unions or principals transitioning a child without consulting with the parents. That's, according to this document, that's actually a human rights violation where you're violating parental rights. And now you have that little caveat at the end, best interest of the child, but you're working against the expressly stated will of the parents in transitioning and do it behind the parents' back and then suing the parents when they speak up. That's actually a human rights violation. Now, here's the snapper. I was quoting a United Nations document. That's from the United Nations. So you heard me say, United Nations, it's a good idea. It's not working. Maybe it can be fixed. Maybe it can be changed. There's some value with it. Okay, we don't argue against UNICEF, but read about this UN document. It says is that children shall not be compelled to receive teaching on religion or belief against the wish of his parents or legal guardians. And think about LGBTQ teachings and violating parental rights. Think about that. That's a human rights violation that's going on here in the United States. And you're going back to Trump's a fascist, and I keep reposting it, but you're just missing something. So think about that. And yeah, that is a UN document. Life Some Pointers segment. Like I said, my 401k lost money. That's why you diversify your portfolio. You have certificates of deposit and bonds to... and also a savings account to stabilize things in terms of this uncertainty. Now, once this is over, depending on how long it goes, they'll start building up slowly, but it is aggravating as we're getting closer to retirement. E-devotional. We're getting near the end. It's time for the devotional, the chapel moment, as they say in Protestant or other circles. University, they have what are called chapel. Yeah, there's a little bit more light. Sorry, everything's changing, so I get a little more illumination here. Natural light isn't cutting it. So the devotional, this is my prediction. People will stop praying because they can get all their answers from chatbots. When you deal with God, you have to study it out and then ask him if it's to be right. God makes you do a little bit of work. It just doesn't hand it to you on a silver platter unless there's a pressing emergency. But, people are going to stop praying because why talk to God when your chatbot gives you all the answers you need? That's my prediction. I hope I'm wrong. I pray that I'm wrong, but, just Generation Alpha will not have the capacity to think. Will become too dependent upon artificial intelligence. 43 minutes. And that's the passing scene. Seen with the eyes of faith.